Welcome back to Yehoshua's Daf Yomi Shiur, where the Daf continues daily until the complete revelation of Mashiach ben David. The complete revelation of Messiah, son of David, may be soon and in our day. B'mheira b'yameinu. We are holding by in Chullin, the top of the page, 120b. The words V'lichtov Rachmana b'shchotzim. The Gemara objects, let the merciful one write the prohibition against consuming juice, the juice, gravy, and sediments of creeping animals, and let these halachos of consuming liquefied forbidden fat, dissolved, leavened bread, and a melted carcass of a bird, come and be learned from it. The Torah does not need to state these halachos explicitly. The Gemara explains it is not possible to derive those halachot in such a manner because that derivation can be refuted. What is notable about creeping animals? They are notable in that their impurity is imparted in any amount. Those other halachot, on the other hand, do not apply to less than an olive bulk, less than a gazais. Okay? The Gemara continues to examine the source for the status of liquids with regard to various halachot based on that which is taught in a braita. With regard to untithed produce and the new crop of grain of the year, which is forbidden until after the Omer offering is brought on the 16th of Nisan, see Leviticus 23:14, and consecrated produce and the produce of the sabbatical year after the designated time when it must be removed from one's house, and diverse kinds, meaning the produce of a vineyard in which grains were sown. With regard to all of them, it is prohibited to consume liquid that emerges from them, just as it is prohibited to consume them themselves. The Gemara asks, from where do we derive this halacha? And if you would say, let those prohibitions be learned from these prohibitions of consuming the liquid that seeps from creeping animals, liquefied fat, dissolved leavened bread, and liquefied bird carcasses, one can respond that this derivation can be refuted. What is notable about these prohibitions? They are notable in that each of them is a prohibition that develops on its own without any human intervention, as opposed to the prohibitions in the braita, which do not necessarily share this element of stringency. Therefore, it works out well to derive the prohibition against consuming liquids that emerge from a solid, where the prohibition is one that develops on its own, such as untithed produce, the new crop, sabbatical year produce, and diverse kinds. But with regard to consecrated produce, where the prohibition does not develop on its own, but rather only after a person consecrates the produce, from where do we derive that it is prohibited to consume the liquid that emerges from the produce, just as it is prohibited to consume the produce itself? Gambrinan mibikurim, ubikurim gufayu minolon. The Gemara answers, we learn this halacha from the case of first fruits. Consumption of first fruits is a prohibition that does not develop on its own, because the owner must set aside the first fruits, and the consumption of the liquid that emerges from first fruits is prohibited like consumption of the fruit itself. The Gemara asks, and from where do we derive this halacha with regard to first fruits themselves? Titani Rabbi Yossi pri priata mevi viata mevi mashke The Gemara answers that the first fruits can be brought as wine. As Rabbi Yossi teaches, the verse states with regard to first fruits, you shall take of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you shall bring in from your land. Deuteronomy 26, verse 2. Since the verse mentions fruit, this indicates that you must bring actual fruit, and you may not bring the first fruits. Mamish, this week's parsha, right here. Unbelievable. Since the verse mentions fruit, this indicates that you must bring actual fruit, and you may not bring the first fruits in the form of beverages. But if one brought grapes, and he had already pressed them into wine, from where is it derived that he has fulfilled his obligation? The verse states, you shall bring in from your land. This superfluous term serves to teach that if one brings wine for the mitzvah of first fruits, he has fulfilled his obligation. But this derivation from the case of first fruits can be refuted. What is notable about first fruits? They are notable in that they require reciting the passage which begins, my father was a wandering Aramean, Deuteronomy 26, verse 5. Arami Ovid Avi. A wandering Aramean, and placing the first fruits in the temple, whereas no such requirements exist with regard to consecrated produce. Elav Gamar Mitruma. Rather, one can derive the prohibition against consuming the liquid that emerges from a consecrated produce from the prohibition against consuming the liquid that emerges from truma, meaning the portion of produce designated for the priest. The Gemara asks, and from where do we derive this halacha with regard to truma itself? The Gemara answers it is derived from the fact that truma is compared to first fruits, as it is written, you may not eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your wine, or of your oil, or the firstborn of your cattle and of your flocks, or any of your vows that you will vow, or your pledges, nor the offering of your hand, Deuteronomy 12:17. And the Master said with regard to the phrase, nor the offering of your hand, that these are the first fruits. Since the verse uses the term truma with regard to first fruits, the halacha of truma is compared to the halacha of first fruits. Just as liquid that emerges from first fruits is forbidden like the fruit itself, so too, liquid that emerges from truma is forbidden like the produce itself. Consequently, the prohibition against consuming the liquid that emerges from consecrated produce can be derived from truma. The Gemara refutes this derivation from truma. What is notable about truma? It is notable in that a non-priest is liable to receive the punishment of death at the hand of heaven for consuming truma, and he must restore the value of the produce he ate, adding 1/5 of its value as a fine. This element of stringency does not exist with regard to one who consumes consecrated produce. Rather, one can learn the prohibition against consuming the liquid that emerges from the consecrated produce from both truma and first fruits. The Gemara refutes this derivation. What is notable about truma and first fruits? They are notable in that a non-priest is liable to receive the punishment of death at the hand of heaven for consuming truma or first fruits, and he must restore the value of the produce he ate, adding 1/5 of its value as a fine. This is not true with regard to one who consumes consecrated produce. Rather, the prohibition against consuming the liquid that emerges from consecrated produce is derived from truma and one of these prohibitions, meaning a liquefied carcass of a bird or dissolved leavened bread, or it can be derived from first fruits and one of these prohibitions. Ushar mine peiroi shel truma Rabbi Eliezer mechayev ken v'chol mishvat Rabbi Yehoshua poito. The Gemara elaborates on the comparison between truma and first fruits with regard to the halacha with the status of liquid that emerges from produce is like that of the produce itself, and it explains that which we learned in the Mishnah in Trumot 11:2. If a non-priest ate date honey or apple wine, or drank apple wine, he ate date honey or drank apple wine or vinegar made from grapes of autumn that grow stunted at the end of the season and are unfit for wine production, or any of the other types of juice made from fruits of truma, Rabbi Eliezer deems him obligated to repay the principal and the additional fifth, like the penalty for one who ate the truma produce itself. And Rabbi Yehoshua deems him exempt from payment. B'may pligi bedun mina umina bedun mina v'hoki v'ansra kalmeh v'negi. The Gemara explains in regard to what principles Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua disagree. They disagree with regard to the principles governing the process of deriving one halacha from the other halacha. One maintains the exegetical principle infer from it and again from it, meaning when one case is derived from another, all the details of the source case are applied to the other. And one maintains the principle infer from it, but interpret the halacha according to its own place, meaning one derives only the basic principle of the source case, whereas all the other aspects of the source case are not applied to the case at hand. The Rabbi Eliezer saradun mina mina. Ma bikum mashkin yotzevin k'mo yisrael na tchum nami mashkin yotzevin k'mo yisrael mina. Ma bikurim afilu shal minin av tchum nami afilu shal minin. As Rabbi Eliezer holds, infer from it and again from it, just as with regard to fruits, the status of the liquid that emerges from them is like that of the produce itself, so too with regard to truma, the status of the liquid that emerges from it is like that of the produce itself, and again infer from it, just as the halacha of first fruits includes not only olives and grapes, but even other types of produce from the 7 species for which Eretz Yisrael is praised, and the status of the liquid that emerges from that produce is like that of the produce itself, so too with regard to truma, although oil and wine are the only liquids from which one is obligated to separate truma, even liquid that emerges from other types of produce designated as truma besides olives and grapes has the same status as the produce itself. Rabbi Yehoshua savar dun mina ma bikurim mashkin yotzin Vehen k'moisen av tchum mashkin yosin men k'moisen doiki v'asrei ma mashkin g'nosh men tchum tirosh v'tzar in midachin lo av mashkin yosin mehen tchum k'moisen tirosh v'tzar in midachin lo. Rabbi Yehoshua holds, infer from it that just as with regard to first fruits, the status of the liquid that emerges from them is like that of the produce itself, so too with regard to truma, the status of the liquid that emerges from it is like that of the produce itself, but interpret the halacha according to its own place. Just as in the case of liquids that are consecrated as truma with regard to wine and oil, yes, they are included, but other types are not included. So too in the case of liquid that emerges from truma, as with regard to wine and oil, yes, they are like the produce itself, but any other type of liquid that emerges from truma is not like the produce itself. Therefore, Yehoshua deems exempt a non-priest to consume any of the beverages mentioned in the Mishnah. The Gemara cites that which we learned in the Mishnah in Trumot 11:3. One may bring beverages made from first fruits to the temple only in the case that which emerges from the olives, meaning the oil, or from the grapes, meaning the wine. The Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is that Mishnah? Rabbi Yehoshua he Te'amar dun mina v'oiki b'asra v'gamalehu mikul mitrumo. The Gemara answers, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua, who says, infer from it, but interpret the halacha according to its own place. He derives the halacha of liquid that emerges from truma from first fruits only with regard to wine and oil, and in the opposite direction he derives the halacha of liquid that emerges from first fruits from truma. Therefore, even with regard to first fruits, the status of liquid that emerges from the produce is like that of the produce itself, only with regard to wine and oil. But according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that the halacha of liquid that emerges from truma is derived from first fruits, even with regard to other types of produce besides grapes and olives, contrary to the statement of that Mishnah, one may bring beverages extracted from other first fruits besides wine and oil to the temple. The Gemara cites that which we learned in the same Mishnah in Trumot 11:3. One incurs the 40 lashes, means 40 minus 1, the 40 lashes due to drinking the juice squeezed from orla, meaning the fruit of a tree during the first 3 years after its planting, only for that which emerges from the olives or from the grapes. The Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is that Mishnah? Rabbi Yehoshua The Gemara answers, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua, who says, infer from it, but interpret the halacha according to its own place, and he derives the halacha of liquid that emerges from first fruits of truma. Therefore, even with regard to first fruits, the status of liquid that emerges from the produce is like that of the produce itself, only with regard to wine and oil.